Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, regardless of your geographical locations, weather that you are experiencing, and your emotional state of being. I am so honored to be presenting for my colleagues through the event that has been sponsored by University of Minnesota, a place that my professional identity was formed many years ago. Today, I am honored to have this hour with you to talk about the ethics of care and how to dismantle racism. We have been talking, at least I have been talking about this topic for many, many years. But it seems like the time now is even more, and in this time is even more important to talk about this topic. And us as mental health professionals take this issue way more seriously than we used to. I would like to make a case for why this topic is important. And before doing that, I would like to have a disclaimer that we need to be taught this collectively, dismantling racism in an authentic, meaningful, and transformative way. We have all attended professional and multicultural sensitivity workshops, but many of us needed CEUs, or we were that was enforced by the clinics and the universities and hospitals and places that we have been working. But we won't be able to take meaningful and transformative way of doing so. Talking about racism, I have taught the multicultural class at master's and doctoral for the last 25 years in my career. Now I'm an administrator and don't teach classes, but I don't envy those faculty that are teaching these courses because of how difficult it is to talk about racism. It is very emotionally charged. It is very emotionally, regardless of our social location. It takes courage, optimism, and an appetite for self-examination, and it is uncomfortable, as I said. Um, some other disclaimers, and that is we shouldn't be doing this work from the place of guilt or shame or anger. It doesn't matter where we are in that continuum. It won't work if you are defensive, if you're feeling guilty, if you are ashamed of what has happened in the history, or you are mad that we are talking about this, or you are mad that racism is happening. We need to be doing this from a place of empathy, humility, and compassion. And we are not trying to talk about the make amends for past sins. They have happened. We can't change anything. We can't even go back to 10 a.m. this morning when we started this talk, my time. Of course, different times for all of you. So we are trying to lovingly, willingly, and optimistically try to lend our voices, hands, hearts, minds, and to be true to our own sense of ethical care as mental health professionals and people that are healers and helpers in whatever capacity that you are working out there with different groups of people. We should do this because we truly believe that all human beings have great value and have a moral duty. We have a moral duty, I believe, to restore truth and justice. And this type of work help all of us because racism dehumanizes all of us. It's not just a group of people. It impacts us on a daily basis, regardless of, as I said, our social location. So first, when we want to resolve an issue, we need to know what the problem is. And I want to start with talking about what has been an issue in our field as if we are psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors. If you are in the field just as a nurse, anything that you are doing to provide helping and healing services, The problem is psychotherapy as a field, as a media, in terms of what needs to be doing for the society. We are seeing that the incidence of psychopathology continues to increase. We haven't been able to cross-culturally resolve any issues or many of the issues for people that are seeking help from us. Psychotherapy, I argue that it's a very conservative enterprise. What we do, we perpetuate the same values and aspirations that creates the need for therapy. We have always, throughout our history, embraced the status quo. People come to us, they talk about how they have been treated unfairly in society. They have been treated unfairly in their relationships. They have been treated unfairly at work, at school. And what do? We tell them that they need to adjust. They need to change their behavior. The other issue is that we, as psychotherapists, as healers, lack the that wider theoretical perspective to understand clients' pain, and kind of contextualize the pain that they are experiencing in society. The other part of it is that not only we basically promote the status quo, even though there are the pathological, social, cultural, and economic systems, and people continue to suffer from the consequences of what is happening to them, around them. But as psychotherapists, we sit in our offices, and social workers, actually, my colleagues that are social workers, have this category of looking at macro and then thinking about micro system and what needs to happen at that level. But it gets lost in the bigger scheme of everything, that we try to get people to adjust to those social, cultural, and economic systems, because we don't see ourselves as part of the macro level changes that need to happen in society. You all know I've been part of graduate programs, undergrad programs. At the most, we have a multicultural sensitivity class, depending on who teaches the course, and how the person gets challenged by students in class. We have this minimum, very minimal conversation about the role of class, gender, psychology of psychopathology, and not even talking about treatment when people's issues are because of the psychological pathology around them, in terms of what's happening in society. So then, instead of making social justice, we have actually preserved injustice and inequality. Talking about moralities, moralistic intentions. Many of us throw our hands and yet we are not here to judge. We are not here to tell people. Even I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I often see my students when they're providing couples therapy, family therapy. When I ask them who they think is right, or what are their feelings about the husband, the wife, the couple, the partners in the room, they say, "Oh, I'm not here to judge," even though they are judging, even as they're talking. Sometimes I ask, "Oh, I'm not there to talk about fairness and justice. I don't go there because I'm going to lose my clients." I was presenting at an international conference, a psychiatric conference, just last 2 nights ago, and I was the keynote, and then they were 3 other people that went after me, and they were psychiatrists. They all thanked me to bringing this issue related to morality and justice into the conversation. But in their presentations, there was not even a word. They were talking about how children are treated unfairly by parents. Another panelist was talking about how the school system, the educational system, is treating children. But in none of their conversations, they talk about how unfair it is and what we need to do to change the education system, how we need to challenge parents to treat their children fairly. We don't use that language when it comes to morality, because we say this is not something that we do. It's clergy's job, it's other people's job, not ours. And as usual, we have been silent with all the issues that are happening around the world. Where do we see our associations making a huge deal out of issues related to social injustices happening? I have been American Association for Marriage and Family Therapists to put the statements out when things are happening that are unfair, and our executive director were actually saying, if we want to do that, we have to take so many things into consideration. And people that are part of our association, many of them will be upset because we have many therapists that are very conservative when it comes to these issues. And so nothing changes. We continue to perpetuate the problem of injustice and inequality, and even preserve it, more than doing that. So to me, my solution, social justice oriented psychotherapy, and that is the kind of psychotherapy that actually is relevant to cultural sensitivity. We bring that to the room regardless of who is sitting in our office. We need to be bringing those larger social problems like gender socializations, like class, like race, like the issues related to acculturation, issues related to addictions, child abuse, technology related problems. We do bring them in. When I see people go, well, I do that. I don't know what you're talking about. That's what I do in my office. That is amazing and fantastic and good for you. We are talking about as a field, as a group of people that's supposed to have the sense of identity, professional identity, social justice, and advocating for injustices has not been part of our professional identity. So even when I talk about gender socialization, I've been working on the issues related to gender and how we are placed. The gender is a social construct to me, but everything is based on that. So when a couple come to to the therapy room and they're talking about their struggles in the relationship, I often bring the gender socialization pattern, that how men have been socialized this way and how women have been socialized that way. When people talk about the struggles they have, I talk about class and the importance of class. If I'm working with a couple that or a family that are middle upper class, I'll bring that up. I make them conscious that they have resources that they can actually rely on, and there are many people that do not have those kinds of resources. When I talk about minorities, I often talk about the process of acculturation and the stress that gets created by the process of acculturation, and how that may impact their depression, their anxiety, their relational issues that they have. When we talk about substance abuse and people that are suffering from the consequences of substance abuse, we often need to be talking about what is happening in their families, what is happening in society, and how they get pigeonholed into, you have addiction, you need to be you need to take care of that. When we talk about child abuse, that what is happening, the isolated families, families that don't have resources, a family that belongs to a working class and they have to work different shifts and they're not home, and why child neglect may happen. And so making people conscious that these issues are larger than their families, and we need to take that into consideration in the therapy room. I also think that we as psychotherapists, as healers, have to be able to be cultural and transcultural activists. We have to understand and prescribe new social and political politics. We have to be out there in developing policies that can be helpful to people that are suffering. And we routinely see that many of us think think that in the therapy room, you people talk about their problems and then we diagnose them, and then we give them either medication or tell them, let's do cognitive behavioral therapy and have you to think differently, even though all these issues exist outside of the therapy room and they're suffering. When they leave our office, they go back to that social context, but not much happens in the therapy room to help them. And so I believe that if we develop a social ethics mentality, we can actually help our clients, the vulnerable and the disadvantaged segments of society, to at least don't feel that they are wrong, because that's what we do. We tell people you need to adjust. At the least we can do is that I know the way you get treated by society. I know the way you get treated by your company. I know the way you get treated by people around you are not fair. But let's see what we can do together to help you deal with some of these issues. If it's, we can, again, social workers, my colleagues that are social workers do such a good job in terms of advocacy, more than any other mental health group. I want to shift a little bit in our conversation about dismantling racism to talk about something that may seem obvious, but many of us have a hard time. I've seen my colleagues, my students have a hard time differentiating racism from bias and discrimination. Racism is not the same as having biases and prejudices and discriminations. Biases and prejudices are very much innate. It's basically we discriminate based on the biases we have. And it's bias is a product of our biological evolution. We all have it. It's a cognitive processing of information that we put things in different categories. And we're not responsible personally responsible for those innate and unconscious biases. And it's not a personal failure to have them. The issue is we think we don't have them. We can't even, we are hiring faculty at our university, and an applicant was presenting. It's a field of marriage and family therapy. We highly encourage our faculty to talk systemically, to go beyond psychopathology and put people within the relational context. And so the person that was the applicant that was presenting was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy as the only thing that helps. And if any of you are familiar with the systemic thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy is not something that we use, cognitive behavioral therapy, but that's not something in systemic thinking that gets promoted. And so when he was presenting, faculty at the end of his talk were like, well, we asked him, okay, yes, cognitive behavioral therapy, any other systemic classic MFT models that you're familiar with? And he said, no, cognitive behavioral therapy is the one. And so we had biases against someone who is not, who is supposedly has a degree, several degrees in marriage and family therapy, but is not a systemic thinker. So that's a bias. And based on that bias and prejudice that someone only relies on cognitive behavioral therapy, therefore we were thinking that we would like to have a new faculty that is a systemic thinker. Therefore, we were thinking of not hiring him. And therefore that means that it's a bias, and then we act based on that and discriminate and say this person may not be the best fit for this program. But we were I wanted my faculty to be very conscious of this process of thinking, and when we talk to the faculty saying that we are not going to be hiring you, I actually did talk to him about the reason, and I said that is something that you really need to be thinking about, and that's something that we as your colleagues were thinking about in terms of you being part of our group. And so that is bringing it to the conscious level. That means that we knew what biases we have, and based on that, how we are making decisions. Now, that is the bias and prejudice is something that has nothing to do with power, as racism, which is we talk about power differences between groups of people. It's way more specific than this universal human propensity for biases and discrimination and prejudice. Because whenever we talk about racism, people go, everybody discriminates, everybody, all people around the globe are discriminating. Absolutely. There are biases everywhere. Absolutely. But we are talking about a structure, a system where these biases are held by the dominant group, people that are decision makers, and then they are turned into law and policy. So in order to make it a little bit more specific, racism is about the economic that are all come together in terms of the dominant group biases and prejudices, the policing of minority groups, the justice system, the education system, the banking system, the housing, healthcare system, the way all goods and services are distributed. It doesn't matter. We have this issue with our white allies that they say that I'm nice, I've never discriminated, I'm not a racist. But what happens is that white race. That is the bigger question that needs to be out there. In if we want to dismantle racism, our white colleagues or people that can pass as white or minorities that think there are no issues, it's just black people are not motivated enough and brown people are taking our jobs, and the indigenous people, too bad, they lost the war and they deserve what they got, they just couldn't fight with white people. That won't ever help us change the system of racism, because again, we have people that are saying, I haven't done anything, my best friend is black. All my colleagues, I often hear that in our university, that people say, well, look at all the minority faculty that we have hired. Yes, but the decision makers, the system, the institution is all based on white system mentality. So what to do is we have to shift the conversation around racism to talk about personal beliefs and behaviors about the system and structure. I'm going to give you an example about the 13th Amendment, going back to when the slaves were free. In 1965, as you know, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified. Look at the exception, that what happened was they freed slaves and they said, you're free except if you have done anything criminal. So imagine you are living in a context of a plantation, and you don't have any other skills, you don't have money, you don't have resources, you have nothing. Today you were given some food and a place to sleep. Tomorrow you are on your own. You don't have job skills, you don't have money, you don't have savings, bank accounts, anything like that. You're out of the house. And they were promised, when they put the 13th Amendment together, the slavery ended, they said that all Black people will get a 40 acres and a mule, something to start life. No one ever got anything like that. And then, of course, today racism, I mean, the slavery ended, and tomorrow these people were looking for jobs in a society that thinks that Black people are 3/4 human, and so they wouldn't be giving jobs. And so if they were homeless, they were arrested. So the 13th Amendment was like, you're good to go unless you do something that we need to punish you for it. And anything was punishable. You looked at a white woman the wrong way, that's punishable. You're going to be put in prison. And so what they did, they arrested homeless people that didn't have jobs, didn't have resources. If you are out there, you have a family and you're hungry, perhaps you will be stealing something to eat, and then you get punished, and then they will put in prison, and then prison workers were leased into the industry, the plantations again, and say, okay, these are free slaves, but because they did something that is punishable by law, then they're in prison, and when they're in prison they have to do hard work, and therefore they're going to go back to plantations and provide that work for them. And so basically what happened, it was the criminalization of color happened in this process. And so the Black Code was enacted were freed, that they could not, it restricted all aspects of Black people's lives. I mean, imagine just for a second that you out of your home, place that you had to sleep, and the food that you had to eat, and then everyone in society is against you, but you still have to eat, you still have to have a place to sleep. And so then they created this segregation law, Jim Crow, that you all have heard, to institutionalize the discrimination and deprive Black families of access to economic stability. So they were freed, but not free. This lie that has been, you are separate but equal, never happened. And so the Jim Crow law impacted multi-generational Black wealth. Now, in systemic thinking as a marriage and family therapist, we always put people within the context of at least to regeneration. What happened, even when we look at anxiety, if we look at depression, this person. And so that creates a different way of looking at family interaction than what happened. So when we think about Black people and what has happened to them historically, we have to put it within the context of generations. You know that owning property is what gets people to the middle class, and that's something, the GI Bill and redlining that happened prevented Black people to actually create a decent family life for themselves. So how did we have middle class in America? It's through home ownership. What happened was that they, as you know, people got a land and a non-refundable loan to build their homes. And so because they have homes, they could actually gain the low-cost loans in college tuitions, unemployment insurance, and the land that were given to white families actually created a context for them many generations ago to accumulate wealth. I had a student many years ago, a white the young man in my multicultural class. He came to me and he said, I would like to do a presentation on white Americans. And I want to show you how hard we have worked to get to the place that we are. And I'm sick and tired of hearing in multicultural classes how minority families have suffered. I said, absolutely. Why don't you do a presentation on that? And so he prepared a presentation on the struggles of white families. And he said, I went to my father and asked him, we had a picture of my grandfather standing in front of a half-made home. It's the land, it's mud everywhere. And he's standing in his working clothes in front of a home that is not done yet. It's half built. So he said, I told my father that I'm doing this presentation on how hard white families work, and how we have created this, society by hard work of white people. And I want to know more about this picture. And so he said, my father told me that your grandfather or great grandfather or great great grandfather, I really don't remember the details, got this land and a $20,000 non-refundable loan to build this home. And all of in that neighborhood, your aunts and uncles, all of them got this money from the government to build this home. So he brought actually that picture to the classroom and started crying and said, I, as a white man, did not know the difference between what My family, my grandfathers, my ancestors received, that created a sense of security so they could become middle class. And then we constantly talk about how hard, when in classes I ask students to introduce themselves, white people always introduce themselves as hardworking. I belong to a family, a hardworking family. And that is not something that we want to question. But I hardly hear black students or brown students talk about hardworking, even though I know that those Mexican students in my classrooms, what parents have suffered to get them to a place they are. I know what people that like myself, I'm an immigrant from Iran, how hard we have worked to make this place our home. But we don't often introduce ourselves as hardworking. But often we see that white people believe that they always worked hard. And so that creates a context for people believing that they worked hard generations after generations. And the reason Black people don't have anything, don't have any resources, because they just don't work hard. They just need to work hard, and they accomplish everything that they had. I was supervising a woman just kind of middle 50s, and she was saying that her great grandfather, she was talking about how white people worked hard and Black people didn't, and said, my great great grandfather, when they arrived in New York, generations ago, he found the silver dollar, and he started his life in this country with that. He had nothing. I said yes, but that silver dollar, he went somewhere and gave that and got some money and started his life. If a Black person would find that silver dollar, they would be accused of stealing that money. That's the difference. That's a very simple difference between the experiences of different people. And so if we go back, Black people excluded multi-generationally from wealth that they could never accumulate. The practice of redlining, that there were white and Black neighborhoods. There are stories about good white people that purchased homes for Black people under their name, so they can live in the same neighborhood, and the houses of these Black people were burned to the ground. There are so many stories about how Black people have been treated. And so I would like us to contextualize and go back from the beginning. We can talk about many other groups, but today, for the sake of this conversation and the time that we have, I'm talking about how if you go back from the day after slavery, we're not even going to get into what happened during slavery, but the day after until today, this Friday, February 12th, 2021, that we are having this conversation together, these challenges have been happening. So it's all about simple economics. You have to have resources, little resources to start from. The low cost loans for building homes and college tuitions and all of that will make a difference over time. So the average white American family has a net worth of 170,000 as opposed to 17,000 for Black families. Again, please don't talk about Oprah Winfrey and go, well, there are people that made it. Absolutely, in any system there are some people. We are talking about an average group of people as a group living in a society. We're not talking about exceptions. We're not talking about successful people. We're not talking about, there are many white families that are suffering economically. But the issue is when they go out there, no one knows that they may be suffering, and so they have the privilege of being white and enjoying white privilege. The idea that white privilege was basically the birth of the idea of white privilege is because of centuries of uncontrolled racism. So we all know showing up in a white body, even if you pass, even if you're an indigenous person, look white, you will have more resources. You can take advantage of things that non-white bodies cannot. We treat them unconsciously different. It's not something that we are conscious. Store clerks, security guys, loan officers, realtors, police, salespeople, teachers, college admissions, it's everywhere. We look at Black people and we anywhere that we are, we treat them differently. I'm going to share an example with you. In Louisiana, Black women were put in cells with male prisoners, and some became pregnant. In 1948, legislatures passed a new law declaring that all children born in the prison system with African American parents serving sentence are the property of the state. The women raised these kids until they were 10, and then they will the prison system will put a ad in the newspaper, and 30 days later the children will be auctioned off on the courthouse slab, and they call them cash on delivery. And then the proceeds were used to fund the schools for white children, and many of these Black children were purchased by prison officials in working in different places. So there are so many, and when I often talk about these things, it makes people very uncomfortable. Of course it should make us uncomfortable that this has been happening. So it should make you uncomfortable enough that you want to do something to change many of these things. So why racism is not changing is one of them is the idea of universalism. We talk about everyone discriminates. Why are we talking about this in this country? Individualism, the idea that look, we all have choices. We all can do better if we just make different decisions. And so that has been one of the most dangerous ways of perpetuating this thing that look, my family worked hard, and everybody so both universalism and individualism have been used against the changes that they really need to happen. And so it's rooted, both universalism and individualism rooted in white fragility, something that many people are talking about, and the denial of the existence of racism. To me, the denial of racism is racism. Just because you have lack of knowledge of what's happening, that means that if we need to be talking about how that actually helps with continuation of racism. So what is anti-racism work? You can do political work, seeking change in laws, political institutions, structures, rewriting curriculums, redesigning structures, be conscious about policies that are being developed and implemented, relational work, being honest with each other in our relationships, be humble, don't take things personally. It's not about you. It's about the pain that the system has caused other people. Do inner work, work on our own unconscious biases, watch some documentaries, some movies. There are, whenever I present at international or national, regional conferences, and I'm talking about these things, my audience all look the same as me. They all are suffering. There are Black people in the room, brown people in the room, indigenous people in the room, and we are all in pain, talking to each other, speaking about the pain that all of us are suffering. The movies that are made, the documentaries that are made about the lives of minorities, who watches them? People that need to be watching them, they're not watching them. People that are watching them are the ones that are suffering. So of course nothing changes. Of course we become more angry and rageful and feel helpless every time that we are knowing about these things. To me, the golden rule, if we want to change anything, is staying informed. Many people say, oh, I'm not political. You better be political, because the price of bread, the price of gasoline, everything in society is based on politics. We cannot afford as psychotherapists to stay away from politics, because everything that is happening to our patients and clients in the society, in around us, is because of policies and politics and what's happening around us. Please don't be proud that you don't care about politics, that you don't watch news because it bothers you. You need to stay informed if you want to make any changes. To me, the ethic of care is about the moral obligation that we have to contribute to healing of the world. I believe it is our duty to be a source of wisdom, compassion, courage, and service. And we all have to recognize that human dignity should be important to all of us, especially to us as healers and helpers and people that provide social services. Think about what Martin Luther King says about the universe is the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We need to be contributing to the bending of that justice. And we, again, it's not about knowledge based on, I'm going to go back to this disclaimer I had at the beginning, should not be based on anger, shame, and guilt, should be about love, joy, humility, and consciousness. We no longer need white allies. We don't need white saviors. We don't need people to say, I'm so sorry you're suffering, I understand. We need white warriors. We need people that change the context for us, talk about, become our voices, and not do it because do it because it's an ethic of care, that it is, we are morally responsible to do that. We need white warriors to help us, because nothing ever changes if people that are in power don't do anything to change that. I often say that the freedom of slaves, of the civil rights movement, did not happen because Black people were sick and tired of how they were being treated. It happened because white warriors say, this is not okay. We're not going to put up with this. And they stood by Black people. They sat together in restaurants and says, end segregations. They were brave enough and they took this issue personally and they did something. And so if we ever want to change this, we need white warriors that can help us in the challenge that we are dealing and everything that we are dealing with. And so our long-term goal should be the paradigm shift for white people. We don't have power in society to change things at the institutional level. Only when they understood, acknowledged, and accepted the long history of oppression for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, the change can happen in the world. And so I want to end my talk by showing you this slide that is Heather Heyer, is the woman that got killed in Charleston by a white supremacist that ran over her. I always get emotional when I see this and share this in my talks, that the night before that she went to this protest, she wrote, the last thing that she wrote on her Facebook was, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. That's the part that is important for us as mental health professionals. That if you're not outraged with what's happening around you, to people that you know and you don't know, if you're not taking these things personally and not doing things about it, you're not paying attention. Please.
Hello, Dr. Danishpour, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, your everything kind of ended real quickly. I think there was a little bit of lag and your slides popped off. Did you finish your presentation? Did you just tie up for
I
Q&A?
did. You couldn't hear me?
It just happened real
Yes. Would
funny.
you like me to put it back? I thought.
If you wouldn't mind, that would be great. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so
I
much.
can put
And
it back.
thank you all
No
for
problem.
your just Oh, the chat in the chat box is just amazing. Your presentation's been amazing. I'm glad you're doing this. I need a minute just to take a breath and say, wow, thank you. Yes, we share your sentiments in the chat box with everyone. This has been amazing so far, and we're just now getting to the Q&A. Whenever you're ready, do you need a moment?
No, I'm good.
All right. Okay, so questions, please submit them in the Q&A and we will go from there. So Rick says, I'm the current president of Minnesota Addiction Professionals, the local affiliate of NADAC, and I would be interested in any suggestions for doing this important work at the systemic statewide level. I want to do more than just support and encourage. Do you have any suggestions, Dr. Danishpour?
I think my presentation, I believe Rick asked this question at the beginning of my presentation. I hope I provided some roadmaps.
Yes,
and so I just want to get to other questions in the little time that we have. I'm really hoping that I answered the question with my presentation.
Sure, thank you. An anonymous learner asks, how do you see this dismantling of racism in the context of COVID-19? It seems that COVID has shown us other layers of racism that continue to exist.
So I published actually a paper in a Journal of Family Process with some of my colleagues, and we actually talked about this exact issue of how COVID has shown us even more of what is happening in society. And so when I say stay informed, please stay informed and know more about it, talk more about it. I always say that your dinner conversations, your brushing your teeth in the bathroom with your spouse, all of these, you're driving somewhere with your kids, you are buying groceries with your family members. You need to be engaging in these conversations. To me, that's what I do personally with my family members. I think it's important for all of us to know and do something continuously with what is happening in society so we can make changes happen.
Thank you. Stephanie asks, how do you suggest talking with clients to challenge racist/white supremacist language?
Yeah, I actually did a presentation recently for American Association for Marriage and Family Therapists, talking about how to talk about politics in the therapy room. I happen to, because of I lived in Minnesota for 22 years and was clinically active all those years. And because of the location that I was in, I was working with executive directors of different big companies in Minnesota. I was working with, and my specialty is working with men in relationships, and because I think that the issues of gender and gender socialization really impacts men, and if we want to make a change because of the power in families that belongs to men, we need to work with men. So I actually have happened to work with many white men throughout the history of my work, my clinical work. My colleagues at the University are all men, the decision makers at the university are all white men. And so I do believe that the bigger part of it is lack of information and not wanting to give up power. And so you can, believe me, you can talk about these conversations. I worked with a man that owned 40 guns and felt that except me, every minority in this country should not live, basically. and they shouldn't be here, and this country belongs to white people. And actually we talked about his childhood and how his stepfather abused him and how he never felt safe, and because he didn't have power in that relationship and he was so little, that when he got bigger and had more money, he purchased guns, and it's all about the suffrage in that personal relationship. And then he thought, okay, anybody that has less power than I then should pay the consequences of what happened to me. And so we were able to actually get him from the most personal issues that was happening to him to what's happening in society, and talk about minorities and get him to bridge the gap between what's happening with him personally and how he treats people that have less power than him.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Great question. And thank you for your comments and explanation, Dr. Danishpour. Robert says, Dr. Cornell West associates racism with colonialism and therefore also capitalism. What do you think?
I think Dr. Cornel West is so incredibly right. That I have a book about working with family therapy with Muslims, and I didn't write them from the religious perspective. I think Muslims are another social group that have all the pain and ordinary issues that any other families have. So in my book, I'm talking about how to use family therapy techniques with people that are part of this faith. And I have a chapter on colonialism, talking about how the history of colonialism and how Europeans went to any continent and took away their raw resources. And then when they left, they actually left the legacy of white is better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. There are so many questions
Um,
coming so fast and furiously here. So I hope if you need a break at all, Dr. Danishpour, just holler and I'll
I'm
stop.
good. No problem.
Oh, you are a true pro. And I'll have to circle back. We've gotten a lot of questions now about the name of your book and stuff. So before I send the email, I'll connect with you about how we can get that information out to everybody.
Sure.
Nyquish
You just
asked,
Google my name, it pops out.
oh, okay. We can just Google you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how do
Google
we
my
as
name.
people of color support our allies in becoming warriors?
Oh, that's a $1 million question. We are all exhausted of being warriors, but also it is our responsibility. Never give up. If that becomes your calling, if that becomes your passion, everything that you do is about how to support your colleagues and how to engage conversations and tell them that they're not paranoid, they're not making things up, they're not hallucinating and seeing things. They are happening. And one of the things that we can do is to validate the pain and suffering of people. And then at the same time, we have to do the same thing with our white colleagues and talking about how they need to challenge them and say, it's not enough to say, I have a Black friend. It's not enough to say, I understand, I hear you. You need to tell me what you're going to do to change some of these dynamics.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and thank you for the answer. Diane asks, how does one let go of anger toward white people in order to move forward?
Um, that's hard. And I talked about it at the beginning of my presentation and at the end of my presentation. Anger doesn't do much to solve a problem. It just eats us up. So for the sake of your own sanity, get rid of your anger. And as you know, energy goes from one form to another. And so instead of being angry, become an advocate for social justice. Use that energy to to do something, to engage in conversations with people. My dinner parties, when I go someplace, when I'm at a picnic, believe me, I engage in these kinds of conversations. Instead of just being so angry and disappointed, I say, that's okay. People don't know. Let's just engage in conversations with them and give them more information.
Thank you, thank you. An anonymous learner asks, how can BIPOC psychotherapists use our power and leverage in the field of psychopathology to advocate for our clients and patients?
Again, I'm hoping that I was able to answer at least some parts of your question by first of all validating their pain and not trying to have them put up with the status quo. One of the things that as psychotherapists we have learned is we're not going to engage in these conversations about fairness and justice. We're just going to say, okay, what are you going to do about it? How does that make you feel? And just kind of personalize it and stay within that personal relationship, validating and then telling them what is possible to do. You can write to the healer and helper, you can write to senators, you can take into policies, you can be involved in your local police behaviors and everything that you can do in your communities. Go out of your home, go out of the comfort of your offices that is our sanctuary, and go out there and do things for your clients. That's how change happens. Historically, that's not what psychotherapists have done. And if we don't do it, we will continue to perpetuate the cycle.
Thank you so much. Great question. And Julie asks, as a white person, it's easy for me to become complacent with the fight to dismantle racism. Your talk has renewed that spark in me to rejoin this fight. What recommendations do you have for me to hold on to this spark?
It is hard, I know. When we are comfortable, it's a kind of a masochist to become uncomfortable, because comfort is something that we all would like to have in our lives. I really appreciate this question because it is exhausting. It doesn't matter if you're white or black or brown or part of indigenous group. It becomes exhausting. What you but the I say that I see that as my moral duty on a daily basis to challenge my kids. My mother is 82 and she's staying with me because we had a death of a young man in our family. And so she has come to stay with me. She's 82. I still challenge her about these ideas because all societies are suffering from prejudice and biases. And so I'm challenging her and my husband says, why do you do this? I say, because that is something that I think is part of my moral being. And so be my mother, be my kids, be my friends. I need to use that ethical standard of care in all of my relationships, not only in my classes, not only with my faculty, but everywhere that I am. So I will send you all kinds of positive energy, and I hope you continue to continue to be a white warrior and help us in this fight.
Well, thank you, Dr. Danish. We could all use more positive energy these days, that is for sure, for ourselves and each other. And that brings us to 1 o'clock, and that is our time for today. On behalf of the Center for Practice Transformation, we'd love to thank all of you for taking the time and joining us for the great dialogue and the community here in the chat box in the room. And we'd like to extend an extra special thanks to Dr. Manijeh Danishpour for sharing your time and talents and passion and truth with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.